disrupted.
Did I fuck?
Weird thing to happen. Hello, one and all. Welcome to this edition of Kitz Corner. Open a fantastic day so far. So I want to show this for a second. This is kind of a fascinating take. This is an interview from 1984 of this KGB, former KGB agent, now de facto, Yuri Bezmenov. And I know this name gets passed around, especially if people have listened to Joe Rogan. I know he's mentioned it multiple times. I never knew this name until now. But this is a fascinating interview because this person is going to explain and kind of sum up. He kind of is almost like a psychic predicting what's to come. And this is kind of a sum up of the kind of woke ideologue neoliberalism take that we're in right now. This kind of matrix kind of world that we're in right now, to use Andrew Tate's coin of phrase, we're in the matrix. Kind of why we're in this psychological trope, why we're in this constant cycle where wokeism really comes from, why it's being used in BlackRock and these, evil globalistic organizations. What's the purpose and intent of it? Well, this guy is going to explain about it in a televised interview from 1984. So 1984, they even warned about the idea that woke was going to take over, how it's going to influence the American culture and dominate over society, and how it's going to really just be an oppressor to us and vindicate our culture from the oligarch, from the people, from the ruling class, from the globalists and the tycoons. So this guy is about to explain it here, and it's pretty fascinating. Take a listen.
Mr. Bezmenov was born in 1939 in a suburb of Moscow. He was the son of a high-ranking Soviet Army officer. He was educated in the elite schools inside the Soviet Union and became an expert in Indian culture and Indian languages. He had an outstanding career with Novosti, which was and still is, I should say, the press arm or the press agency of the Soviet Union. It turns out that this is also a front for the KGB. He escaped to the West in 1970 after becoming totally disgusted with the Soviet system, and he did this at great risk to his life. He certainly is one of the world's outstanding experts on the subject of Soviet propaganda and disinformation and active measures. Well, you spoke several times before about ideological subversion. That is a phrase that I'm afraid some Americans don't fully understand. When the Soviets use the phrase ideological subversion, what do they mean by it?
Ideological subversion is the slow process which we call either ideological subversion or active measures, активные мероприятия in the language of the KGB, or psychological warfare. What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country. It's a great brainwashing process which goes very slow, and it's divided in four basic stages. The first one being demoralization. It takes from 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation. Why that many years? Because this is the minimum number of years which requires to educate one generation of students in the country of your enemy, exposed to the ideology of the enemy. In other words, Marxism-Leninism ideology is being pumped into the soft heads of at least 3 generations of American students without being challenged or counterbalanced by the basic values of Americanism, American patriotism. The demoralization process in the United States is basically completed already. For the last 25 years, actually it's overfulfilled, because demoralization now reaches such areas where previously not even Comrade Andropov and all his experts would even dream of such a tremendous success. Most of it is done by Americans to Americans, thanks to lack of moral standards. As I mentioned before, exposure to true information does not matter anymore. A person who was demoralized is unable to assess true information. The facts tell nothing to him. Even if I shower him with information, with authentic proof, with documents, with pictures, even if I take him by force to the Soviet Union and show him concentration camp, he will refuse to believe it until he is going to receive a kick in his fat bottom. When a military boot crashes his balls, then he will understand, but not before that. That's the tragic of the situation of demoralization. The next stage is destabilization. This time, subverter does not care about your ideas and the patterns of your consumption. Whether you eat junk food and get fat and flabby, doesn't matter anymore. This time, and it takes only from 2 to 5 years to destabilize a nation, what matters is essentials: economy, foreign relations, defense systems. And you can see it quite clearly that in some areas, in such sensitive areas as defense and economy, the influence of Marxist-Leninist ideas in the United States is absolutely fantastic. I could never believe it 14 years ago when I landed in this part of the world that the process will go that fast. The next stage, of course, is crisis. It may take only up to 6 weeks to bring a country to the verge of crisis. You can see it in Central America now. And after crisis, with a violent change of power, structure, and economy, you have so-called the period of normalization. It may last indefinitely. Normalization is a cynical expression borrowed from Soviet propaganda. When the Soviet tanks moved into Czechoslovakia in '68, Comrade Brezhnev said, "Now the situation in brotherly Czechoslovakia is normalized." This is what will happen in the United States if you allow all these schmucks to bring the country to crisis, to promise people all kind of goodies and the paradise on earth, to destabilize your economy, to eliminate the principle of free market competition, and to put a big brother government in Washington, D.C., with benevolent dictators like Walter Mondale, who will promise lots of things, never mind whether the promises are fulfillable or not. Your leftists in United States, all these professors and all these beautiful civil rights defenders, they are instrumental in the process of the subversion only to destabilize the nation. When their job is completed, they are not needed anymore. They know too much. Some of them, when they get disillusioned, when they see that Marxist-Leninists come to power, obviously they get offended. They think that they will come to power. That will never happen, of course. They will be lined up against the wall and shot.
That's an interesting take. That's pretty powerful. That was said in 1984, and just hearing it now in 2024 with the stuff that's going on right now, it just kind of gives me that awakening feel to really better understand the state that we're in right now. Like, this kind of paints the picture in my mind of why, we're so hyper-focused when it comes to identity. The back and forth between which bathrooms to use, and, LGBTQ versus the, parents and schools and this and that and the other, and hyper focus of it, while we're not focusing on economics, while we're not focusing on increasing transportation, providing healthcare for people, using our tax dollars to invest in our country and our resources. Like, it paints that picture. And that really highlights what the plan of this all is. The reason we're so hyper-focused on identity politics, the reason why we're so hyper-focused to, fight one another and yell at our neighbors and friends and family, it's all created so that we destabilize ourselves, that we all completely crumble, and we're arguing, yelling at each other for that a big government or a overreaching, international conglomeracy like the WEF can storm in, take over our country, take over our resources, and enact their criminality towards us, and then keep us more oppressed. So that's what I take away from this. This is kind of like the playbook. This is said in 1984. This is kind of like the playbook of what the 21st century, this, postmodern industrialism, as Klaus Schwab would say. This is kind of almost highlighting that. This is kind of like the This is like the Dwight D. Eisenhower warning of the military-industrial complex. They said this in 1984 because they tried this in the Soviet Union. This is what they tried to push in the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union collapsed and said enough was enough. And now, here we are kind of enacting that in the Western Hemisphere. And it's kind of ironic because we spent so many years, fighting against communism. We spent so many millions and trillions of dollars, trying to stop the idea of communism. But yet, really inside, we had top leaders of the World Economic Forum and non-government organizations and hyper, these staunch capitalists and big giant global investors that are enacting communism for themselves. And even like when Martin Luther King Jr. even said that it's socialism for the top tier class, but rugged individualism for everybody else. And that's how they want it. That's how they're playing this. And when you have rugged individualism, when we're screaming and yelling at each other on stupid crap, really, the hyper identity politics, even though it's important, we shouldn't be mentioning about it. The fact that it's so inflated to top levels is showing how this is played out. And they purposely do that to undermine us, to get us distracted enough so they can enact more pressing tactics towards us, so they can undermine our economy, our national security, our finances, our healthcare system, everything in between. So that's an interesting takeaway. That this was said 1984 on a televised broadcast, and this guy was a former KGB agent, de facto got away from it, moved to America in the 70s, and here he is saying exactly what he saw, and he's giving a stark warning about here's the methods that they're going to use to abuse you, because we're basically pawns to them. We're basically pawns to the establishment. We're pawns to the WEF. We are pawns. We are lab rats. They don't see us as individuals. They don't see countries. They see companies. Just like the movie, the 1974 movie Network told us. When the guy went to the room there, to the boardroom, and he was told that there's no countries, there's companies. So that's an amazing takeaway. That's an amazing statement that was said there. And of course, you're not going to hear this on the news. You're not going to be told this in school. And this is just something that people should be thinking about. This is something that should be in the back of your mind when you're seeing the news clips of talking about stuff that doesn't really need to be said, or like stuff that seems hyper focused on. And that kind of makes me think of, like, even with the wokeness, the Disney wokeness and the rebooting of all these movies to try to include more, gay characters and stuff like that, how they're so hyper focused on that. It just seems nonsensical to what's really happening. It just seems like a bunch of nonsense to what's really happening, which is them using this as a distraction to then pull the rug underneath you and watch you fall, watch you and your country fall. So this is just crazy. It's crazy that in 2024, watching this now of what he said back in 1984, it's so mesmerizing. That's 40 years ago, right? No, yeah, 40 years ago. It makes your mind blow.